Hey, I hope you guys are having a good homeschool year so far. I know some of you started earlier in August, some of you started mid-August, some of you haven't even started yet. You're waiting until after Labor Day. And in an ideal world, we would too, but we homeschool with a charter here in California, and they started is it 2 weeks? I don't even know. Was it last week? I don't know. But we already started our homeschool year. We are taking it slowly easing ourselves back into the swing of things. Even though we do homeschool year round, we did take like a couple weeks off for summer. So we're just trying to get out of summer mode. And that takes time to do because the days are wonderful, especially here in Southern California this time of the year. It's like the perfect weather because when kids are out of school, it tends to be really foggy. And so right now, from like mid-August to about mid to late October, it's like the perfect weather here in Southern California. Bright, sunny days, warm days. So we're trying to enjoy it as much as we can while getting back into the school groove. But today I wanted to share with you some of the books that we read before summer started. I came out with a lofty plan of all the books that we were going to read. This is why I don't like to plan, because whenever I do plan something, it never turns out the way I had hoped it would. And it's disappointing. So I don't like feeling disappointed. So what do? I tend to go with the flow with a lot of things, or my plans are very loose and not so rigid. And so I'm going to share with you the books that we actually did read this past summer. And it will start with the books that we recently checked out. And then later I'll go into the books that we actually did read in summer because I got to go find them somewhere. Right, so the first one is Jenna Kutcher's How Are You Really? Now, so I listened to her podcast, which is called the Gold Digger Podcast, and it's one of my favorites that I always listen to, that and Amy Porterfield and Being Boss too. And it's really deep, like surprisingly deep, and it's not really about business. And so I highly recommend this if you feel yourself in some sort of transitionary period in your life, or you're just really into, like me, you're really into going deep into who you are and healing whatever needs to be healed mentally and emotionally. So I highly recommend How Are You Really? Next, my younger son picked this out, but my older son ended up reading it because he read the first 3. I think this is number 4, which is The Last Kids on Earth and The Cosmic Beyond. And I don't know, would you call this a graphic novel? Or is it just, I guess it is a graphic novel. I don't know. It's not like your typical graphic novel. But there's a TV series based on this on Netflix, and my sons really love it. So, hi. We are a bunch of Star Wars nerds here, and my kids love Star Wars, so they got a bunch of easy readers. So first, this one here is about R2-D2 and the Lego Star Wars. This one's about Chewbacca. This one's the Clone Wars. And this one is Angry Birds Star Wars. So I let my kids read what they want to read. And I mean, that's how I get them to read, is by letting them read what they want to read. And as long as they're reading, I'm happy. Next, we have Star Wars Adventures, which I believe, comic book style. Or graphic novel. Would you call this comic book or graphic novel? I would call it a comic book. Like, how do you distinguish the difference between the two? What are you getting? Okay. It's hard for me to find a quiet space here. Some of you know that we are finishing up our unit on California on the Gold Rush. And so I saw this book, decided to get it to see how it goes, possibly get more as we study about other states. I don't believe they have all 50 at our library, but I don't know. Maybe we'll get some. I don't want to buy books. I don't need so many books. Like a lot of the books that we read it once or twice, and then that's it. We don't reread it over and over and over again. And I only want to keep books that we treasure or we read often. And so I'm slowly trying to minimize our library. I've done a really good job doing that, but we still have one bookcase full of books. And I feel like we could have less one day. And then my daughter, she's only 4 and she doesn't know how to read, but yet she knew this was Iceland. So I'm not too sure how. Just because she saw ice and so she assumed it was Iceland, or I don't know. So anyways, we went to Iceland for our baby moon for my daughter, and it was my husband and my 2 older kids, and so Iceland holds a dear space in my heart, and so we're gonna read this too, or we did read this. And then now I'm gonna go find the books that we actually read over the summer. Be right back. Hey again. All right, so I'll start with me first. Finally finished this book. I mentioned this before in an earlier video that I am a slow reader when it comes to nonfiction, but a fast reader when it comes to fiction. So it takes me a while to work through nonfiction, which is normally why I like to listen to audiobooks when it comes to nonfiction. But these are actual books that I read with my own eyes. So, How to Raise an Adult. This was an excellent book that I highly recommend everyone to read, not just homeschoolers, but also just anyone with kids. We need to read it because we do coddle our kids quite a bit and we need to prepare them for the future. And so we want them to think for themselves. So I highly recommend this book. And talking about thinking for themselves, another book that I finished reading is Raising Critical Thinkers by the much beloved Julie Bogart. And again, another highly recommended book. We need to raise our kids to be able to discern the different information that they are given, to figure out fact from fiction, to, learning how to think for themselves. And also what they really need to learn, what we all need to learn, even as adults, is how to be open to other perspectives that differ from our own, that may make us feel uncomfortable. Like we need to sit with that discomfort rather than go on the attack. So this is a highly recommended book, and she does offer activities that you can do with your kids for different age levels, and this is something I'm going to keep on my bookshelf because so that I can easily reference it throughout my kids' childhood. Because I have a teenager, a soon-to-be teenager, 2 more years, and they'll be a teenager, and a 4 and almost 7-year-old. My oldest son, he had a birthday during the summer, and he is a big fan of Stranger Things. I know some of you may not think it's so appropriate for kids, and definitely not for the younger ones, but he likes creepy, scary things, and Stranger Things to me is like Goonies and X-Files combined, and to me that's like a perfect world. 2 things that I absolutely adore, and my son, he loves Stranger Things, so he got books. So we have Erica the Great, we have Dungeons and Dragons, Tomb of Ewen, and then we have Volume 1 Library Edition and Volume 2 Library Edition. And I will show you these books. It's a graphic novel, right? So he really enjoyed reading these books. He zoomed through them. I mean, they're pretty easy to read as these graphic novels. But due to Stranger Things, he is now interested in Dungeons and Dragons, and I actually signed him up for a Dungeons and Dragons course throughout school. We do have like a gaming like a gaming store. I don't know what to call it. They play Dungeons and Dragons and card games, but they also offer board games that you can check out. And so anyways, they have Dungeons and Dragons night, but everything is so advanced. They're like they don't have beginner classes. Maybe if I inquire with them, they'll put on a beginner class. But I figure out school, he can just learn the basics and then maybe eventually join the D&D groups. I don't know. I'm sure they have a teenage D&D group somewhere. So these are the books that we actually read over summer. I don't think they really fell in with what I planned. I would have to go back and watch that video. But to be honest, watching my old videos always make me cringe because they were bad. And I know a year from now, I'll watch this video and I'll think the same thing. So tiny improvements, tiny improvements. And I will see you in the next one, which is somewhere. Okay. Ciao.